I'm Amy from Doodle Dog Designs. I used to do a lot of counted cross-stitch projects when I was younger, and I really like the way they look on the linen fabric. And I find it's harder now to see and to do the counting to get everything just right. So I'm currently working on a counted cross-stitch project that I got as a kit. It's pre-printed on the fabric, and I find that much easier to do. My mom and I wanted to come up with a way that we could transfer the cross-stitch pattern to the fabric without having to do all the counting. So she took a pattern out of this book. It's Stitches from the Schoolhouse by Renee Plains, and she did this pattern here, and here's how it turned out. So I'm going to show you how with this pattern that I'm going to do. This is out of a Heart to Remember Blackbird Designs book, and I'm going to do this pattern here. It's called Basket of Memories. Now this should work as long as the printed pattern is the same size as the finished project. Now in this instance, the finished project is supposed to be 6.5 by 4, and the printed pattern measures about 6.5 inches by 4 inches, so it should work. Now if your printed pattern was smaller or larger, you might have to enlarge or shrink the pattern, or you could change the number of threads that you stitch over to make your X's. So what I'm going to do is I took a photocopy of the pattern. I just didn't want to do it directly onto the book because I didn't know if my marker would leak through onto the page. So I just took a photocopy of it, and I've got it on my light box. I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move. And then I have my piece of linen. This is the same count that the pattern calls for, and I'm going to center it over the design, and then I'm going to tape it down also. Then I'm going to use a 9-point Sharpie marker. This pattern is going to be easy to do this because all of the color is the same, but you could do the same thing with a different pattern and still just make a dot for every marking at every square that has something. And then you'd have to reference the pattern to know what color to use in that spot. So I'm going to make a mark, just a little dot. At every spot. This is a little bit hard to see through. Probably be easier on a lighter colored linen and going to be harder if you're using an even darker colored linen. This part here is pretty easy because I can see the pattern. It's just back and forth. Now I will still have to count the threads when I'm making my crosses. I just won't have to count over to know how far to go to get to the next X. I'm going to put my X right over the top of the dot that I make, so it will be covered. You could probably use a disappearing pin, but I find that the disappearing pins sometimes are hard to see. I've got a blue one. So this is going to show up better. Of course, I will need to make sure that I cover it with my stitches. As I'm doing this, I'm looking at my book here, and there is a little bit of a gap here. So I thought it didn't look like there was anything there, but it's hard to see through there, so I wanted to check. I don't think you'd want to do this process on a really complicated pattern, really full thing. I think this would not work very well, but for a simple pattern, you'll find this is a faster and easier and more fun way to do the stitching. So like a sampler, a child sampler, something that's supposed to look primitive, this is going to work great for. Okay, now I'm going to take my floss. It calls for DMC 169, and I will use 2 strands of this to stitch. So when it comes to the stitching, I'm just still going to stitch over 2 strands. And I'm going to put that dot right in the middle of my X. And that should cover it up. I like a project to look primitive, like it was done by a school child many years ago. So I'm not going to be too worried about being perfect. If some of my dots are off a little bit, I'll still just put the X right over the dot because I don't want that dot to show up. And since I used a permanent marker, I'm not going to be able to get it off. If you're looking at a really intricate pattern, really detailed, this is probably not the method for you. But if you just want a primitive, easy project, you might try this method. And again, here is the finished one that my mom did. As you can see, it's also not perfect, but I think the pattern is not perfect. It's off on some of the letters, and it's designed to be that way, so it looks like something that a child made. So the perfect type of project for this method. Be sure to click the like button and subscribe below. I'll see you next time. Bye.